no cop doing their job, doing it right, and not being all corrupt and shit and killing people unnecessarily, no one doing their job as a cop deserves to die at the hands of one of their fellow citizens who's crazed with propaganda and willing to sacrifice themselves for some crazy political ideology that doesn't even make sense.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled brainwashing in order to bring you news. Breaking news. A special segment of the almost daily Zcast, focused on curious, quirky, and quixotic news items that you may have missed during the last 48-hour news cycle.
And or stuff that's breaking right the fuck now.
The incorrigible Mr. Zeppo.
I missed the timing on that. Hello and namaste, friends. With the caveat that I hope y'all understand that I do not pretend to be a journalist. It is with a heavy heart and some, irony that I bring to you this tidbit of currently still sort of breaking news. Breaking as of 10:30 this morning, so I'm 30 minutes into this brand new event. But I'm sure lots of people haven't come across it yet. And I felt it only correct for me to postpone the thing I was about to sit down and talk about in order to address this, because it was a large enough concern. Not that I'm an alarmist. God forbid I should be convincingly accused of being a fearmonger, because I don't believe that's the work I'm called to do. But I digress. This is happening now here in Washington. I say here, I mean this country. I am nowhere near the national capital, because I'm all the way the fuck out in sunny, not so sunny, although unnecessarily warm for this particular time of year, California, Southern California, because Northern California's got a little bit worse, and I'm glad I'm not up there. No offense, my neighbors to the north. But I was just about to sit down and share with you my thoughts about the epically ridiculous, and I say that with love, the epically ridiculous Godzilla versus King Kong, or I think it's just Godzilla versus Kong. Or is it Kong versus Godzilla? I don't remember. But the new one that just dropped. But I didn't feel right because, although I've got some deep thoughts about this, actually, and I'm a bit of a fanboy, despite the fact that I totally acknowledge that this genre of film is not, and I don't think ever has, attempted to strive to be, Shakespeare. But I digress. At 10:30 this morning, I preempted all of that and sat down to try to wrap my thoughts around this event as the sort of post, because it's already happened, right? It happened before 10:30. It must have happened, I'm going to guess, in the 9 o'clock hour. And we were getting the news reports of it in the first half of the 10 o'clock hour, and I caught on by around 10:30. I don't know. We'll find out exact timing, I'm sure. But the nature of this event is so simple and so clear that I didn't need any further detailing in order for me to have formulated some thoughts and concerns about not the root origin of it, which is a popular place to go. Who is this? Why did it happen? What's the real cause? No, but really, what's the real cause? Sure. I mean, that's all valid. But I'm always more implicitly and explicitly concerned with what does this mean moving forward at like a big level, at the experience of our at a community-wide experience level. But anyways, not to be weird, for anyone who isn't fully aware, who's not currently tapped into the news, and is, bless your hearts, tuning into my show first, thank you for your support and your ear holes, and lending me access to the theater of your imagination with what some people call my mighty sexy voice. I don't know if you think my voice is sexy, but if you do, I don't mind. Just don't make it weird. The U.S. Capitol building, sorry, that was an awkward transition. The U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C., which was, as we all know, infamously raided, to put it gently, on January 6th, is currently on serious lockdown and now sort of flexing its newly deployed muscle of manpower and security defense positioning, if I can make up terms, since the onset of that, of the post January 6th insurrection security detail. And what I find really fascinating, so to lay out the facts as I understand them for anybody who's like, what the fuck is he talking about? Apparently a lone singular driver in a car, which we don't know, rental, his own, their own, drove up to the newly, whittled down, for lack of a better term, security perimeter. In other words, today they were able to drive on a street that last week you couldn't drive on. And he approached an intersection and sort of apparently drove past some fencing that was open and or not like in a locked setting, potentially, and this I'm not clear on, hit some Capitol building police officers and then was stopped cold by a barricade that, I don't know if it was one of those emergency instant, like it's quick response, it springs up out of the ground and it happened in that moment, or if it's a barricade. My first impression was that it looked like a barricade that they had brought out and put there as part of the new reduced security footprint. So that's the fascinating thing, right? So there's not a lot of other details. The thing that I'm intrigued by is that this is happening just days and or like a week and a half, 2 weeks after the much criticized and trash talked strict, or what would you call, red alert level security stance had been sort of drawn down a bit. There is still a tall perimeter fence around the Capitol building compound itself, from what I gather, but they're no longer occupying a 2 or 3 block perimeter around that in that way that was so poo-pooed by those who's basically stand in the party who are generally responsible for causing the security response in the first place. But I digress. I'm sure lots of more details will be dropping soon. What I'm interested in is the timing, right? Like no one tried anything between January 6th and now that we're aware of. And to the best of my understanding, I haven't seen any reporting. There's probably some incident or two, minor things, and some, quote, disrupted plots that I haven't heard of that have happened and or been reported about. And of course, there is the ever frothing debate about whether or not such incidents are real, fake, whether the incident is real but the news around it is fake, etc., and all the variants, etc. I mean, it's clear in my mind in these, aftermath moments of what is a kind of like womp womp, not very impressive, thank God, not very damage inducing, there was no great toll of life here, but for whatever reason, somebody tried to do something dangerous, something, something, quote, bad, in the form of, driving a car onto the grounds of a building where, in a way, through a path, over, obstacles and perimeters which you're not supposed to drive through. For what reason? Who knows? But this will quickly, I think, given my understanding and my 30 plus years experience of milling about and just watching the conspiracy theory community behave beyond the basic arguing of conspiracy theory, this will be quickly dismissed as staged and or a false flag and or fake in one way or another, and will also quickly be integrated into the body of like evidence of whatever conspiracy theory it fits into. Whether or not it is in fact, in reality, related to any of it or not, right? Whether or not this incident is real or fake, it will be dismissed as such. Whether or not this is MK Ultra or a false flag or a whether or not this is seriously just a Trump supporter who's annoyed and at their wits' end and emotionally fucked up and in need of healing and feeling betrayed and angry and outraged that none of the Q Storm stuff happened, it will be dismissed as fake and fake news and part of this agenda or that agenda. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if that's happening right here, right now, as I'm on the air live talking about it on this Friday morning at 11:18 on April 2nd. I'm really, really, really glad whoever this is, whoever did this, that they didn't choose to do it yesterday. For obvious reasons, which should make some people at least giggle, if not crack a smile, if not downright laugh. And I don't mean to be, I'm an absurdist. I'm a faux Zenist. I'm not an official Zenist. I don't belong to any Zen ideology or school or whatever. But I understand and choose to implement in my own life the Zen principles of, it's Zen. And you can quote me on that. It's Zen is a principle of Zen. If I were to have written my own book of like The Incorrigible Mr. Zeppo explains Zen to you. But I digress. We have to be able to healthfully tap into our sense of humor, right? Thank God this guy didn't pull this off yesterday, because, oh God, the capitalization of it being an event that occurs on April Fool's Day and the kind of like double reverse, negative reverse, inverse opposite reverse psychology that could have been played with it. In fact, I won't be surprised if this does get used in that way anyways, just by sheer proximity to April 1st. Which, dear friends and audience family, may very well be why I am deeply spiritually motivated to encourage the world to completely reject, abdicate, renounce. I hate to use the word cancel because I don't want to be lumped into cancel culture. I think there's a big difference between cancel culture as a toxified form of something that is exemplifying an ever-increasing slippery slope of toxicity in what it itself is trying to do in fighting the supposed toxicity in the world, and healthy self-moderation, regulation, and change, which we need to do as individuals, as communities of individuals, as communities of communities, as collectives of collectives, and as a species, which is a collective of all of those, all of us together as one big happy family. So brace yourselves for the fake news knee-jerk response, oh, you poor sheeple, rejection of this event. Now, I'm not naive enough to presume anything about this one way or the other, folks. I'm not gonna assume anything yet. I'm going to try to discern for myself using my critical thinking skills. And I'm, like I was saying before, I'm much less interested in proving one or the other right? I can see the argument for this thing potentially being something, that is artificial in its nature because of all the ways in the various spectrum of conspiracy theory variant content that you could explain away something that is staged or something that is a, quote, false flag. I get it, right? But I also get it that what the purpose of that content going in the other direction is to seduce people into automatically dismissing anything and everything that might be dangerous to other programming involved, right? That might lead to questioning as fake news, as a hoax, as a this. I've talked about that. Put a pin in that. We'll talk about it again, I'm sure. So there's a problem if you just run around. It's deeply problematic. I don't want to sound dismissive here, right? I also just don't want to belabor a point I've already addressed and that I'm sure I'll address again. But it is deeply problematic if you run around dismissing anything and everything you dislike, disagree, have cognitive dissonance about, can't wrap your brains around, or aren't told to buy into by those that have permission to tell you what to buy into, according to the programming or to the cultural setting that you subscribe to, as fake news. If you just run around, you end up dismissing everything. There's this sort of hyper cynicism, self-undermining mindfuckery that gets invoked. And then eventually you get to a point where you have to dismiss everything everywhere as a hoax, ultimately including yourself. Like, it gets that bad. I've seen that in people. But I digress. There's got to be something to it. It happened for a reason. And like I also caveated before, I'm much more interested in wrapping my brain around the way this kind of event will impact people as individuals, the community as a cultural collective, the realm of policy and law, like what's going to happen? How is the law? How is the system, which I don't inherently presume to be a monolith of evil, nor do I presume to be a monolith of righteousness. How will the system respond to this event? And how will the political, ideological, tribal groups out there in the world that are active players in our landscape, especially those that are increasingly slippery slope sliding towards or already overtly violent, right? Like, how are the people who've been violent lately about political crap, how are they going to respond to this? And how is the Trump base itself going to respond to this? There, the question of an authentic confirmation of like who this person is and what their motivation really was is going to come back into some meaningful resonance, because then we can ask the question, how will the Trump base respond if this dude that just tried to attack the Capitol today by driving himself into a wall, an immovable object that he should have, could have, would have known was there. How will the Trump base respond if he's just authentically a Trump guy that was seduced by Q, manipulated by that echo chamber of Trump's bullshit and Q's bullshit? Because I believe they are, although conjoined by the identity culture of the cult of personality base and their adoration for Trump, their mega inflated adoration, their superheroification of him. I don't think that the two are actually directly related in reality. I think Trump is Trump, and he's always been a bit of a scam artist, a pathological liar, both from like an addiction level and a sort of manipulation level. Even if he's not manipulating you, he's so addicted to lying that he's gonna like bullshit you somehow in a meaningful way really hard. And so his base was just like, his base has been in a pincer, a psychological, political, ideological echo chamber pincer maneuver akin to that time chronological, like weird Chronos pincer maneuver of Tenet, except totally different, right? And the net level effect here is that there's one thing I know is that the GOP and Trump are going to have a tug of war, right? They're going to, despite whatever the fuck else is going on in the political landscape right now, of which there is plenty, folks. And we'll come back to talk about that in more specific clarity in an upcoming episode of Good Morning Bluetopia. I was thinking of changing it to Zentopia as a sort of like reposition, and I'm going to focus less on criticizing the president and more on my aspirational vision of how we could heal the system from within. But that's truly, rightfully, its own segment. And so is my keeping a laser focus on critiquing the president, whoever is in that office, the way I did while Trump was in office. For which I need something else. I need another Topia type name. Or should I just stick to the weird and somewhat prone to awkwardness concept of just sticking and using whoever the president's name is, right? Like, good morning, Trumptopia. And so then it'll be good morning, Biden-topia, until some argue Kamala Harris is a shoo-in for the next person to occupy that office. So it would be, theoretically speaking, good morning, Harris-topia. I can imagine, and I'm already dissatisfied with Biden-topia. It just doesn't have the same ring as Trump-topia. Trumptopia, though, by the way, remains and will be sustained as its own brand and licensable product that I think I'm rightfully should be respected as coining, especially since it never did go viral all fucking 4 years that we lived under the psychological abuse of Mr. Trump. But I digress, friends. The gnarly concern I have here, and there's a few that come to mind right away in the immediate context of my understanding of how things can unfold after such peak moments of national emergency, national awareness, national hyper-focus, right? When things like this happen, especially of a criminal, violent, blah, whatever the fuck this is kind of nature, it's entirely possible and I get it. I'm no expert. I could totally be wrong. My concern, and I'm not living in fear, and I don't think anyone spoon-fed this for me to say it, right? No one was talking about this when I was scanning through the news. My concern is that copycat activity could eminently emerge, right? Frankly, I think that the sort of assertiveness with which the Biden administration and then the various diverse state authorities responded to January 6th did indeed have a cooling effect. And I'm not a statist by any stretch of the imagination, which is why I always giggle at people when I occasionally get accused of being a statist. I just don't want to burn the fucking thing down to the ground. I'd rather heal everybody, because when I say everybody, I mean everybody, not some special little group over here, not my tribalist, brainwashed center or church or blah, 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 or identity construct label. No, everybody. Species wide. And then there's no need for all the other nonsense. Right? My concern, so copycat stuff is going to come up. I'm also concerned that there may be fracturing and or schisming as more and more people in the Trump base that were like Q adjacent, Q supporter, but not really like invested, start wanting to really start walking away. There's there's been waves of this before, I think. Some of the more clingy, adherent, blindered on Q people will tell you that's nonsense and that I'm full of shit or that it's all fake news. But, I mean, I've had the conversations, folks. Not only do I see it in the news, people giving their testimony, I see it in social media. I see people giving their honest testimony in their own social media platforms. I've also, had the occasion to have the occasional conversation with people like, yeah, used to be big supporter, kind of thought Q might have been onto something, then was like, then realized this is all really stopped making sense and starts to stink to high heaven of political manipulation. So that kind of reactionary fissure-causing thing is exponentially more dangerous when there's a, quote, leader at the head of the party that's got momentum. Ironically, despite whatever jibber-jabber, self-applauding nonsense may be coming out of some members of the GOP and some members of the Trump base, from my perspective, outside of that hallway of echo chambers, because everybody's got their own, every party's got their own, it can't be denied. It's really evident once you step out of them. To step out of them all, you can't step into any other, right? If you really want to see clearly. You can't be clinging to and fighting about or fighting for any other political ideology. You can return to your political party once you've seen clearly, in my opinion. But I digress. There is no clear... Trump is not being the clear, strong, powerful leader at the top of the GOP. He is classically incapable of being involved in complex, nuanced, long-term work if it doesn't immediately satiate his need for applause and attention and other ego trap, saccharine tokens of adoration. Right? So Moscow Mitch is out there trying to do his thing, and be the real North Star or the real center of gravity. That's, I think, a bit more appropriate, more accurate of an analogy. Mitch McConnell's out there trying to do that. The real center of gravity that sustains the ongoing momentum of the political party, even as various charismatic personality tyrants. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know why personality didn't come out correctly. But personality tyrants, of which categorically Trump not only is, he created the phenomena, has been his whole life creating that phenomena of like charismatic personality tyranthood and the normalization of like, yeah, that sounds like a fun thing. Let's try to all be that. Trump, though, that has a characteristic that is sort of his generation's embodiment of their scale of sort of attention span impairment, right? It's at and I use the word scale there because it's operating at a different level than, say, everybody after MTV changed, like radically altered everything, including everyone's attention span. So he's from an earlier generation in terms of his upbringing and the level at which it's operating. And that doesn't mean it should be dismissed or assumed to be anything. He has a truncated and disabled attention span. And he can't, I mean, I don't mean that as a sort of insult. I mean that as an observational, like, conclusion. Like, the trend in which the way he works is that he eventually wants to like, stop giving a fuck. He just, moving on, next thing, new girlfriend, new wife, new business venture, new casino, new hotel, new scandal, new crazy product I'm throwing my name behind. New, always something new. Why? Oh, gee, I don't know. Because he is a living example of all the red flag dangers and potential pitfalls of living too deeply anchored in one's own ego. And letting the ego run rampant means that more is never enough. And a clear, unbiased, I need to glorify him observation of his actual actions, his actual words, his actual personality, his actual track record confirms that more is never enough for him. And so he makes a habit of starting over. Like, I'm done with that, whatever that is. I'm going to go find something new, and then I want more of that. Until I can no longer have more of it. And then I don't want it anymore. I never wanted it. It's horrible. What an ugly face. What an ugly idea. What a stupid, meaningless thing. Who would have ever wanted it? Even though 10 minutes ago, an hour ago, 9 weeks ago, a year ago, I wanted the fuck out of it. And he expects, the reason I knew he was problematic from before he announced he was going to go political is that he, probably unduly influenced by too many American mafia movies, is literally a person who in real life is proud of the fact that he demands personal loyalty that he doesn't deny. He has never denied it. He can't argue against it. He won't say a word about it. He just kind of smugly smiles and doesn't say anything. It's one-way street loyalty. He will cut you, slit your throat, throw you under the bus, back up the bus, squish you and roll over you until you don't exist, and or tie you up by the belt and drag you until there's nothing but like worn down hip bones. And that's graphically violent, but the man is monstrous. Monstrous. He is a giant Trumpzilla, right? Like, and here's a little insight, sort of secret into the inner workings of my mind, like, I'm going to open a little door for you. Like, the books that I'm miserably doing a horrible job of writing include a whole world in which some future iteration, some parallel universe in the future that's based on everything we literally just went through, and tragically, and it's satire, because I'm saying, like, here's the critique. What Trump did, and I think he knows he did this, he made it acceptable. He tried to, you know how there's like, hey, normalize this, normalize kindness, normalize being, nice to each other. Well, he normalized kit and caboodle from soup to nuts, the package of being whatever the fuck Donald J. Trump is. And he created a culture of people who aspire to be like him, who think it's not only okay to be like him, they think it's cool to be like him. And that's why I say to you, friends, our job of dismantling that culture in a healthy, compassionate, kind, tough, but also we can't become what we're trying to tell them not to become kind of way, that work must continue in a conscientious way for a really long time. Because if there's one thing that this event today means, is that now we have 2 points. January 6th and this, right? Never mind that there's I am not ignorant of, nor am I so naive as to naively just neglect the following. There is a massive cloud, vectoring trail of data points for violence directly associated with and having to do with Trumptopian thinking, right? Trumptopian, the Trumptopian norm, Trump's own idealized, self-involved, self-inspired package of how things can, could, should, would, ought to go, is inspired on, how he would do things, how he thinks, how he sees the world, who he is. And we need to address that, dismantle it with healing, because who he is, fundamentally, at its core, I have been arguing this entire effing time, thank you very much, is a symptomology, a tip of the iceberg expression of a huge network of things that's wrong with all of us as a species, right? As a life form, and which may be, philosophically speaking, archetypically speaking, a problematic set of issues for anything that is alive, that it strives to achieve personhood and then strives to achieve whatever the fuck personhood's about. Some of us think it's about transcending and becoming something other than person, right? And becoming more closely returned to the unity that is source. Others think it's about, like, the continuation of brute individuality and the profiteering on the commodification of anything and everything you can get away with commodifying. Guess which side of that debate I'm on, friends and family. So let's put a pin in all of this, right? These are my thoughts and concerns immediately afterwards. Also, I couldn't help it. I had a sort of sidebar, snarky as fuck, satirical question come up and nag. Because I zoomed back out of this and I thought, what is this event? What happened today? There was one guy that attempted to implement what seemed to be a very poorly thought out, not very well planned attempt at attacking the Capitol building in protest of Joe Biden and the fact that he has been duly elected, and that all appropriate legal measures were exhausted, and that Trump failed to prove his inaccurate claim that there was massive, coordinated, federal level, huge number fraudulent voting. And the problem that we live in an environment that is post all of that, and we live in the paradoxical dichotomy of the people who support Trump can accuse everyone else of either propagating or foolishly being seduced into believing, quote, the big lie that the election was not stolen, the big lie that Biden won. And their arguments are seductive enough. Their arguments are plausible enough that some people believe in it, right? And that paradoxically, the left is saying the exact same thing. So you got two echo chambers of accusation. Two groups of people enthusiastically pointing fingers and blaming each other of falling for and believing in a big, manipulative, political, ideological lie that is covering up the world's greatest scam, which is either that the election was stolen or that the election wasn't stolen. Meanwhile, the system grinds on, and those that profiteer on your life from the cradle to the grave continue to profiteer unfettered. Call me crazy, but maybe Trump wasn't doing jack shit besides creating this wedge, this engineered wedge issue. And my concern is that setting aside, and without disrespecting the victims of, setting aside the ancillary sort of data points of increasing violence or violent tensions growing between the left and the right, because there's examples on both sides. There are people on the left that are charting a graph of increasing political outrage expressed by people on the left against people on the right that is increasingly getting confrontational and violent. It's not as overt and as scary and as intense as, the hate against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And it isn't being, but it's there, right? Because that's how echo chambers work. Both sides are echoing each other. If there's one thing I've been able to clearly observe over the past 3 decades, is that both sides have become exceptionally good, exponentially better over time at accusing and projecting at each other precisely what they are in their own way, maybe slightly different than the way they accused it, but of what they are doing, right? The left, and I mean sort of inclusive because this culture is created by all those in leadership positions, either political or ideological or sociological leadership positions, but then it's propagated onto the base, which is meant to create an echo chamber of the base, echo chambering the same kind of hypocrisy. But the left and the right have gotten exponentially better at eloquently accusing each other of things that they are both doing on all the levels, in all the different ways you can imagine that working out. Now, that is not an absolute statement, right? But it's 44 minutes and 44 seconds. Bing! Right there. And I got to wrap up the show or else I won't be sticking to my new, quicker, faster less longer than an hour format. Thank you, as always, dear friends, for tuning in to the show. Let's if you get where I'm going and why I'm commenting on the things that I'm commenting, let's unite in manifesting through meditation and prayer. I need a better phrase for that. Let's unite in manifestating. No, that's the same phrase. You get what I'm saying. Let's unite through prayer and meditation in manifesting the healing of those who are being manipulated and pushed to the brink of violence. Because I'm not going to go exercise violence against them, right? Like, you can't stop violence with more violence, which is why I've never understood when people say, oh, look at all that violence. That makes me angry. I'm going to go commit violence. But that's what they get you to do. That's the agenda, folks. They want Americans so whipped up and angry over ideology that they can't even really fully articulate or understand completely that they're willing to commit violence against their fellow Americans. And my guess is that's probably what's going on in other countries too. I could be wrong. And even if I am wrong, the following statement can't be. Healing is good. Healing, especially if you take it to a spiritual level that's genuine and authentic and not imaginary, fabricated, misleading, and totally ineffectual and created that way for the purposes of profiteering, right? Because I get it. Anybody can quickly reject the central tenet. One of my central tenets in this show is like, see all these problems in the world? Let's talk about them. Let's talk about all the ways in which other people have tried to solve them. And then let's talk about how maybe if we just healed the world, those problems would be solved. It's easy to be like, but healing is fake. Because the system that creates those problems and defends them and wants them to continue would want you to think it's fake. Anyways, wow. That spiraled way longer than I wanted to, but it is what it is. Dear friends, let's hope and pray and manifest that this isn't the beginning of an increasing trend of American political violence against Capitol buildings at the state and federal level. Because I think there's a strong argument to be made that maybe, just maybe, that's what the evil, nefarious system of oppression would want right now. Call me crazy. But that's what I got to say about that for now. Stay tuned as I return after a brief break to reset and make sure no other outrageous, crazy things are going on in the world. And then take a moment for myself to zen and make sure I'm not forgetting to pay attention to some mundane house chores. I'll be coming back to you a little later in the day today with the much belabored return to the regular ongoing episodic special series, The Incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's Totally Irrelevant Media Reviews, in which we take the time, and I call this self-care, and we'll talk about this on that segment too. I call this allowable self-care if we presume that media is fair game, as long as you're cognizant of any potential negative messaging involved, then, hey, let's take some time to talk about it and nerd out and enjoy the entertainment for what it is, because we can't just stare at the dumpster fire train wreck chaos 24 hours a day and melt our brains talking about that all the time. But fear not, friends, I'll be back again to talk about more news, breaking news, and other ways that politics, society, and stuff intersects with spirituality.
We now return you to your regularly scheduled brainwashing. Thank you for listening.